So, turning point, Stephanus number 10. We've gone through all this stuff, a little bit of the preliminaries, the background, liked and loved by the gods, and mostly concerned about the gods themselves. But now we're splitting this. This dialogue, in a sense, blows open here, and it jumps a level in complexity. So here we go. Socrates says, okay, all this God talk and all this stuff is one thing, but I want to ask something more fundamental. Is the Ocean, right? Is the Ocean because of, right? He's asking what makes the Ocean, right? Now we've alluded to this with God stuff, but he wants to contrast it with something else. Again, is the Ocean because it just is Ocean, and therefore it is loved by the gods? So this is like an intrinsic Oceanness property. Is the Ocean have some internal or intrinsic or essence? Right? This is an early appearance of the notion of essence in Greek philosophy. Or is the Ocean simply, to go back to what we were talking about earlier, because it is loved by the gods? Like, does the love of God, of the gods, make something the Ocean? So you can think of this again, and this, as we saw in our divine command model problem, if we put it in some more modern terms, and the way that it eventually played out in the history of philosophy, is morality or being good, or is murder wrong? Is murder wrong because it just is wrong, and therefore God says, yeah, I was looking at it, and yeah, it's wrong. And unlike us, God cannot be wrong about his judgment about murder, but it's not that his judgment makes murder wrong. Right? He just can't be tricked about it. So in that sense, you can think of this asking, is there an intrinsic property that the gods always recognize, and they'll always get it right. We may get it wrong though. So when we get something about the Ocean, when we mess up, that's just us messing up. There's nothing wrong with the Ocean, because the gods would look at it and say, no, you got it wrong. Or you thought something was the Ocean as it wasn't. Or you thought something wasn't the Ocean, and it was. And we gods always get that right. So the gods are kind of like expert recognizers of the Ocean? Or is it the case that, no, at the end of the day, really, the Ocean is the Ocean because it is loved by the gods. So it is the gods' love that makes it. But remember, if you translate that back into our discussion that we had regarding divine command model, in this one, God goes from being absolutely dominant to be sort of parallel. He's a good knower of morality. Here, God's love or command makes it. Well, then, if you say, yeah, murder is wrong because God said so, then God tomorrow, if he's truly a free being, could say, you know what, guys, I know up until now I've said murder's wrong, but changed my mind, and now it's okay. And in this thing, it would be okay because there's no independent notion of the wrongness of murder, because it's just a function of the will of God. And anyway, so yeah, you got a whole theological issue going on here. But, and you can see how it grows out of this discussion. The Euthyphro is often cited as one of the first direct quests to try and understand what's at the basis of divine command theory. So Socrates, he's open. He blows the dialogue wide open with this one, right? So it's not that the dialogue starts here; it's that it moves towards this, and this takes it up a notch. It's a little more complicated now. Okay, so because now we're talking about internal properties, necessary ones, like what makes me, versus external ones that are properties of something that maybe aren't that important, like wearing the black sweater. So this is something interesting, because Euthyphro says, I'm not sure what you're asking. He's doing the classic, like, I don't follow this. What are you talking about? Socrates then goes off into a bit of a tangled discussion of God loved and all these kinds of things. And he tries to clarify a number of concepts, and it's a little easier if you understand more about how the Greek language works. But basically, Socrates is really after the distinction between accidental properties and the essence of things. And so we can think about something about this in another context, like like think about chocolate ice cream, like what is the essence of chocolate ice cream? Like you could say something like, well, yeah, children all love chocolate ice cream, but that's not the that's a property of chocolate ice cream, right? That is, or so part of what it is to be called chocolate ice cream is often, kids love it. But that doesn't make something chocolate ice cream is the kids love it, because let's say tomorrow all kids started, I don't know, said we don't like chocolate ice cream anymore. You wouldn't say, oh well, actually chocolate ice cream doesn't exist anymore because the kids all said that they don't like it. So there's no reference to the term chocolate ice cream. But it's a property, kind of an accidental property of chocolate ice cream, that children love it, even if it's always the case that kids love it. So it could be used as a characteristic to identify, right, to point out, to select chocolate ice cream, but it's not part of the inner nature of chocolate ice cream. So the same thing here. You might come up with, being loved by the gods as a way to pick out the Hosean, but that again doesn't make the Hosean itself. Um, so yeah, so being loved by the gods, Socrates, they come to the conclusion is kind of a property of the Hosean, but not an intrinsic part of the Hosean's essence. And so Euthyphro, by this time, if you go through and you read the dialogue, he's kind of pretty confused, because he says to Socrates, I'm getting pretty confused here. And he says that, Socrates, says, you've given me kind of a property of the Hosean, kind of like an example of how to identify it, but you still haven't told me what it is. Like, kind of like, you can identify lots of things without knowing. You can identify a person, yeah, like it's very different to say, oh, well, that person is Joe over there, and be able to identify them, and saying, yeah, I really know who Joe is, right? Those are very different knowledge claims, knowledge of how to identify, and then the knowledge of the person. Very different. So that's what's going on in this. And Euthyphro is getting pretty confused. And because Socrates says, you really haven't told me about the essence. You've just told me about that the fact, okay, that there is an essence to the Hosean. Yeah, okay, we've got that. And it's not a function or a derivative of the love of gods. Okay, so you basically told me that the Hosean is what it is in virtue of itself, right? Or in virtue of some sort of inner property. And that inner set of properties or inner essence of the Hosean is something that's always loved by the gods. Okay. And maybe the gods are always good at recognizing it. Okay. But that still doesn't tell me exactly what the Hosean is. You've only talked about it sort of, shall we say, from an external perspective. And okay, so Euthyphro is like, you can watch him burn out in this dialogue, and you can see eventually he's going to bail, right? So right now he's getting pretty tired, and Euthyphro says that, you know what, Socrates, and often this happens, people get frustrated with Socrates, well, Athens got frustrated. Remember what happened, Socrates, they killed him, right? So, be careful about behaving like Socrates. Uh, this gives us, we have a little bit of a break in the dialogue here, you could say. We kind of get to relax with Euthyphro, because this has been fairly, like this, as I said, it's bumps up, it blows up at section 10, as you're asked to think a lot more. And Plato's a dramatist, so he says, okay, let's cool off a little bit, let's have a joke, let's have a little, a little bit of a come down, and because we're going to wrap it up again. So let's relax for a bit. And then they come up with there's this little story of Daedalus. And Daedalus, remember, you've probably heard of him indirectly. You've probably heard of Icarus, right? The guy who put on the wings and the wax, and then he used wax to attach the feathers to his arms. And Icarus and Daedalus went off flying. Daedalus was the great inventor. Icarus was his kid. And Icarus flies too close to the sun. And what happens? Boom, the wax melts, and bang, he plummets into the sea and doesn't end well. And, another father-son thing that doesn't end well. This time it's a father-son activity, and the son is killed, right? So there's a bit of an inversion. Instead of, the father being killed by the son, the father does something such that it leads to the son's death. So there's a number of literary dimensions that are going on here. It's so there's other references and allusions, all good stuff, but it's not necessary for us here to dig into. That's again, if you want to dig more into the context and the surrounding and enjoy the dialogue on more levels. I encourage you to read more up on these background stories. So another father-son allusion here, and it's been alluded to earlier, but I don't know, maybe Plato had father issues. In any case, the dialogue is more or less return. Sometimes people think it's just going circular. Well, there is, but it's more of a structure of a helix where it goes back, but at a higher level, and it keeps going. So Euthyphro is pretty tired. He's worn out. He says, I try to put a proposition down, and like Daedalus, you can make the propositions will move. Daedalus also could make statues that, according to legend, they would get up and walk away. So Plato has used in the dialogues the image of Daedalus, the master craftsman, in a number of places. You can find it in the Meno as well. So let's have a look at this because in a little more detail, because once again Socrates is going to shift gears. So let's dig into this new thing that Socrates does in the investigation of the question, what is the Hoseion?